And I want to start off by saying a quote from the Buddha. And this quote goes, "I am not what you think I am. You are what you think I am." And I'll say that one more time. I am not. I am not what you think I am. You are what you think I am. When we're going into the realm of consciousness paired with neuroscience, right? It helps to look at it from both dynamics. When we're speaking about consciousness, especially conscious experience, let's say even finite conscious experience, like our individual experiences, expressions of consciousness, right? It's a very finite experience of life. We have our own unique thoughts and perspectives and opinions and values, even our own sets of morals and ethics that might not match with others. We have our own feelings, our own triggers, our own memories and experiences that really are not comparable to other people's lives in any way. The only unified thing that combines all of our experiences together, that makes it all whole, that touches on the point of oneness that you hear so many spiritual leaders and teachers talk about, is when we start to go into the realm of awareness. Finite awareness has a focal point, has a lens, has a perspective, has a reference point, has a construct around it. Now, if we're saying that God, right, there's this universal consciousness in which all of us are a part of, then the one thing that all of us share with each other is that all of us have awareness. That is how all of us are related. That is how all of us connect to each other. That is something that is universally applicable no matter who you are, is that if you are alive, the reason you are alive is because there's something called awareness there. Even in basic life forms, there is a level of awareness. Maybe not self-awareness, but there is awareness in all life. So when we enter into the realm of God and divine, then we have to understand that the only thing we can truly say about God, for sure, without completely merging with that totality, but then there are no words, is that God is infinite awareness. God doesn't have the same restrictions or the same constraints that we do in our finite awarenesses. God is not restricted by thought, by emotion, or by belief. Right? The sun is still there, even if you don't believe it's there, it'll still be there. When we have this human experience, then we're taking something that is pure in its totality. You can look at it as clear light, right? Clear light when there's nothing interfering with it, when there's nothing that is causing it to change shape, when there's nothing like a prism, right? You take a prism and you send light directly into it, it refracts, right? When it bends, when it changes direction, it suddenly starts to spread out into different colors, all of which are a part of that source of light. That source of light contains all of those colors, that red, that blue, that orange, that yellow, all of those colors are all a part of that clear light. But when they're all merged together, when they're all formed in a state of complete unity, they are not perceived. They are not seen. They're not recognized as anything different. It's only when there's a structure in the way where that color, like red, can be experienced, can be seen. When we're talking about living a divine life in a human body, or having any experience of life at all, just to experience something, it's like if you've ever sat in a warm bathtub, right? When you're used to the temperature, your body acclimates to it. Eventually, you don't even really feel the water around you anymore once it reaches a certain temperature. And it's only when you move around in the water that you start to feel the warmth again. So that movement is finite life. That stillness, when nothing is perceived anymore, that is divine, pure perfection. That even the greatest masters, the greatest gurus, strive to attain through meditation. And through which that is the only place where potentiality arises. Because you can't create any new level of potential. You can't create new destiny. You can't create something new or fresh from that which already is. You have to go to the source where all of those lights converge together. And when you're in that place, when you come back from an experience like that, you come back as something more light, more of that pure consciousness. In the same way, when you're sitting in that bathtub and it's the movement that allows you to feel that water around you, right? There are a lot of stories as to why we exist, why, human life is the way it is, why existence exists at all. And there is really no answer to that. And there really doesn't need to be. But some part of it that's helpful in our experience is to understand the mechanism by which that happens. So a lot of religions, right, Hinduism, Buddhism, or what have you, they all say that, one day God got bored and God created phenomena in life so that God could experience itself. I mean, it sounds kind of like a sadistic experience, doesn't it? Sometimes. But when you really look at it, consciousness, right? This supreme reality, the supreme existence of God, this consciousness is what created all of phenomena and the principles, right? The laws of causation. But in doing so, when you are the creator of something that exists, you yourself cannot be affected by that thing that you've created because your existence exceeds beyond it, right? It's like Aristotle and the unmoved mover. It's like God is the one that is unmoved in that complete stillness and that totality that initiates movement, that initiates the ripples of creation. That is the initial starter of all things, but at the same time, presence by itself is untouched and unfazed by all of it. So here we have pure consciousness. And to experience that purity of consciousness, not just our finite human experience, but the purity of consciousness, to have an experience of that is an incredible ecstasy and bliss. But to get to the point where you can recognize that ecstasy and bliss, consciousness has to go through a process of integration and evolution, where it enters into the lower stratums of existence and evolves itself, transforms, right? Moves through life, through finite experiences to find its way back to that divine source again. And upon that union, there is such a completion, such a fulfillment of itself, that the ecstasy is so profound. It's impossible to speak of. But we have this very interesting notion that science often perpetuates today. And that is the notion that the brain perpetuates or the brain creates consciousness. And what's more fascinating than anything else about these science studies is that they single-handedly prove that consciousness creates the mind, the self, the body, and all of our existence as we know it. If you look at some of the science behind deep states of mental peace found when someone's in real meditation, real stillness within their minds, you see that there is actually a release of or an alteration in the brain's chemistry via an alteration in the brain waves. When the brain is in a state of silence, the energy that flows through the conscious experience enters into it through these brain waves, through these theta waves, alpha waves, even sometimes gamma waves they've found. And what scientists have seen is when these waves are produced in the brain, they actually increase your neuroplasticity and neurogenesis. Meaning your mind goes through a process in which all of its circuitry, all of the neurotransmitters, everything involved in what makes you you, right? As Guruji was saying, there are, maybe even 4 neurotransmitters at a time, maybe even more than that are functioning just to enact one action, maybe one thought, maybe one action within the body. They're probably much more involved when we even get to the aspect of physical action. But when we enter the state of pure silence, stillness in mind, the brain goes through a reset process in which all of the different parts of the brain begin to recalibrate themselves. And when they recalibrate themselves, they all come into a degree of synchronicity, right? Does that sound familiar? Synchronicity. They all synchronize together. They all start communicating with each other again. And then when you experience, because when you're entering into true meditation, you can experience wonderful experiences like an incredible peace, an incredible happiness or joy, ecstasy. That come through that stillness, that come from that pure state of consciousness, that pure divine consciousness. And as a result, these feelings that come from your soul, when you finally connect to your soul, they actually alter the neurotransmitter activity. In the same way, when you're interacting in the world, you have different experiences, right? Neurotransmitters work bi-directionally. So your neurotransmitters affect the way that you can perceive and feel about life. And simultaneously, the way you perceive and feel about life affects your neurotransmitter production. They go hand in hand. In the same way, now we're talking about something that is not being perceived or experienced, but rather we're removing the experience. We're removing the finite self. We're removing the perceptual finite being, merging that, dipping that into that ocean of infinite awareness. And what's coming out from that is a reset, a recalibration to those inherent truths of God, a recalibration back to those divine principles and fundamentals that we experience as joy, as peace, as wonder, as awe, as beauty. These are the expressions of the Dharma, of the ultimate reality. Because this is the drive of consciousness, of its evolution. We are all driven to something. That is the consciousness within us. That is the infinite consciousness wanting to experience itself. If we look just common sense wise at all of humanity, everybody, no matter the reason, but everybody is driven towards something in their life. And whatever that something is, the idea is that that something will make us happy, will give us pleasure, will make us feel good. Whether we use the term happiness, whether we use the term pleasure, ultimately there's a sense of feeling good if we get that thing that we want. And this is where the finite mind gets in the way of spiritual experience, of the infinite mind. Again, it's the same thing, right? We all share the experience of awareness. Though our thoughts and feelings might differ, awareness connects all of us together. Well, similarly, if you look at human drive and ambition, there is something else that connects us all together, which we can say is inherent to life just as much as awareness is. And that is the drive towards happiness, the drive towards fulfillment, the drive to feel good. There's some people who might argue against that, but I disagree. I feel like if you're saying, no, I want to be of service, I want to do good for others, I'm not into it for my own happiness, I'm into it to make other people happy. Well, what's the point of doing that if that's just going to make you miserable? Would you keep doing that for other people if it was sacrificing your own feeling good? I think most people who are truly wanting to do something for other people do so because it brings them some semblance of feeling good. It feels good to do something for others. It feels good to be of service. In the same way, where all of us yearn for that love in our lives, right? It's so popular that, we have songs, we write poems about it, right? Sometimes we give up our entire life, to sacrifice it for this one person that we think we love, and then we regret it later. Right? When we think love is the peak of experience, but when you actually look at love, love is a force that pulls us to truth, to God. But would you want love if there was no joy in that love? That love without that completion just leaves you feeling empty and in pain. So, love, though it's the most powerful force that brings you to truth, is not the fulfillment of truth in and of itself. Rather, the purpose is the completion of that love. And when your love is complete, when you found the one you love, when that one loves you back, all that's left is ecstatic joy. So we lead our lives searching for this joy in finite experiences because we don't have a framework, especially given the science of today, the society that we live in, the beliefs that everybody shares and partakes in and passes down to the next generation, even though it actually does nothing to serve them whatsoever. Right? We might not know the exact joy that we look for. We just know that it has something to do with that. And we think this might bring it to us. We think that might fulfill us. We think this might lead us to that point. Now, if we can all agree that joy, seeking that completion of that love, is the purpose of all of life, right? You can understand why religion was created. Religion was created in a sense to help us escape from the things, to find a community, an environment to helps us focus our will towards truth and goodness, which we feel brings us some peace, some semblance of feeling good when we are following a path that feels righteous and virtuous. And when we are not following a path that feels righteous and virtuous, we experience incredible pain or stress or anxiety or depression. So a lot of religions were there to give us a community, give us an environment, and give us a path, give us the tools by which we can attempt to bring that joy into our lives and to fend off the other aspects of life that causes us pain and suffering. Otherwise, religion wouldn't exist. It would have no role, no function in our lives, even to what it's been reduced to in this modern era, right? With just its, dogmas and tricks and techniques. Even all of those tricks, if you look at the purpose behind them, if you look at the meaning, the want of the individual who participates in that experience or that trick, who experiences or participates in, chanting mantras, meditating, worshiping God in a temple, because they want an experience they're not getting. And they feel that God will give them that experience if they follow the right steps, or they're suffering greatly and they are looking for reprieve to feel good again. The problem is where we seek that peace and that happiness. So, when we're speaking about awareness and its relationship to our neurotransmitters, first and foremost, we have to look at it from a very young age. You see that a lot of psychologists and scientists have actually found that children, even as young as 6 months of age, right, before they have, you know, logical thought in the same way that you and I might have, before they have a vast experience or understanding of life, first and foremost, they have this expression of moral behavior. And this is very interesting. As young as 6 months of age, maybe even younger than that, you see children start to express morals and ethics. And that they want to give something to others. They don't want to cause pain and suffering. They engage in behaviors that exhibits a goodness for all, not just for themselves. That is where we all start from. This inherent goodness. And then after some time, you see the personality start to form, to really take hold over the individual. And you can say there are various different reasons for that. One of the reasons is, well, look at the world we're in. I don't know many people who get along with every member in their family or are in complete alignment with their own parents' views and ideologies and perceptions of life. I don't see many people on this planet who are incredibly happy or at peace with their life, right? The most prevalent causes of the chronic diseases you see today are all stress related. They're all inflammatory. They are all things related to our own minds and our own bodies attacking itself. Right? Our own lifespan of the younger generation, right? It's started to drop for the first time in a first world country. We've started to reverse in terms of life expectancy. Why? Because people are so unhappy. They're so stressed, they resort to drugs, they resort to other means, or maybe they just don't want to be here anymore. We look at the bigger reflection of the individual as the society, and we see all the problems that we face, all the corruption, all the lies, all the chaos, the wars, the battles, economic struggle. You can understand why a lot of people don't have a lot of hope anymore. They don't have a good outlook on life. But I feel more than anything, what contributes to that the greatest is that every person from a very young age is handed over a lens or perception by which we are forced to view life. And that is perpetuated by our education system, that is perpetuated by medical science, that is perpetuated by even our advancements in technology, that is perpetuated by our society, by our government, by our own families. That this is what it means to be successful, this is what it means to live a good life, that this is what you should strive for, this is what you should want, this is what you shouldn't want. We're never given a moment to just perceive life as it is. Even when we're talking and interacting with other people, we're not interacting with life itself. We're interacting with this perception of life, with someone who has their own ideologies, their own ambitions and desires and wants, their own perceptions of what they think life is. You never interact with a person. It's impossible. What you're interacting with, you're always interacting with a limited construct, an ideology that when you stay around that presence long enough, it can actually even infiltrate your own awareness. Let me put it this way. If you look at the entire body, right? Guruji, I love what Guruji said about every individual cell is capable of producing its own amount of neurotransmitters that can sustain itself on an individual basis by itself for a period of time, independent of the body. Even hair cells and nail cells, the most insignificant ones, so to seem. Well, there's another interesting thing when you look at the human body, and it's that every single cell, when you look at every single cell has all of the genetic coding, all of the DNA for your entire existence. in one cell. And it doesn't matter which cell it is. Every single cell has all of the genetic coding and DNA that lays out exactly who you are. Meaning every single cell has its own inherent sense of self. And this confuses scientists because scientists say there's no reason for a skin cell to know everything about, how the brain cells operate, how, the stomach cells operate, how the lung cells operate. There's no need for the skin cells to have all this genetic coding for the entire totality of our existence to operate as just a skin cell. And yet it does. Which just further shows and details how complete your sense of self is. And it's also been shown that our cells communicate with each other not just through neurotransmitters and not just through electrical signals or electrical impulses, right? They've also found that each cell has receptors for vibration, for energy. Now, if we're looking at this from the physical perspective, let's also look at this from maybe a more energetic or psychic perspective when we're talking in terms of awareness, energetic awareness, right? If this is the reality of the physical body, right, we can only imagine the reality of the energetic body, of the soul, the spirit, and our perceptual field of attention, which extends beyond the physical form. It's what people call the aura. So if we're dealing with a body that both emits and receives vibrational energy, that's not going to be unique to us. That's going to be consistent across 8 billion people. Now, if you're dealing with 8 billion people on this planet, everybody has their own transmission, right? Their own radio station where they're playing their own music, they're playing their own FM, AM radio, and it's causing a lot of interference. It's going to really jumble up your ability to perceive life directly, to perceive life clearly, to see the truth amongst all the smog of human consciousness. Because you're receiving the communication of everybody around you, their own vibrations, their own emotions, their own feelings, their own wants, their own perceptions, their own thoughts have vibration. In the same way, right? Your thoughts triggered, different physiological responses in your body. In the same way, they also emit out into the world and create physiological and emotional responses in other people. Right? I've said this again, you try sitting in a room with somebody who's angry and not feel that anger. It's very palpable. You sit next to someone or try talking to someone who's so petrified, it's hard not to feel what they're feeling. That is why environment is so vital. It's so important. And in some cases, right, we always like to think, especially from like a Western, culture or American culture, that where there's a will, there's a way. If we can push through something, we can make anything happen. And we don't realize that willpower takes an extreme amount of energy. And when all of your energy is being utilized in this formation of perception and consciousness that is not even our own creation, but is merely perpetuating the expression of misery that 8 billion people before you have already established. In fact, more than that. right? They found, neuroscientists have said that when you're working alongside another person, right, whether you're even verbally communicating with each other or not, that your neural pathways start to sync together. They sync together. How scary can that be if you're with somebody who is what Guruji would say, like a parasite in your life? Or somebody who maybe doesn't like you or wants the worst for you, or maybe somebody who, maybe they're just not the brightest. Whatever the person is, or maybe they're a great person, they're really good at their job, they're really good at what they do, then you'd want to work with them. You'd want to synchronize your neural pathways together, right, the circuitry of the mind, so that you, by association, could start to exhibit the same patterns and habits and behaviors down to your very brain chemistry, so that intuitively you can start to operate on the same level of efficiency that they are. If it's something that you want to achieve in your life, if you want to be successful in a given area and someone else is successful there, you want to associate with them. You want to learn from them. You want to work alongside them. Even if they never tell you the secrets to their success, maybe they don't even know. Maybe they don't know how to communicate it or don't know how to talk about it. They're just living that experience. But by association and working alongside them, you start to live that experience too. Another thing that neuroscientists are mystified by, but can be easily explained by consciousness. Now, when we're getting into this hand me down existence, right? This hand me down perceptual field, obviously, there is a part of it that plays into our own level of consciousness. Sometimes you're at a high enough level of consciousness. So when you have someone from a higher level of consciousness born into this world, if they're able to hold on to that purity and that innocence, right, they are able to see beyond what the Maya, right, the human state of mind perpetuates. You see that with science discoveries, right? There was this man, was Samuel Emilwise, is that what his name was? Where, he said, doctors should wash their hands before surgeries because, he recognized a correlation. He wasn't even a doctor or a scientist. He just recognized a correlation. He was working in the hospital. Maybe he was even a janitor. And I think he was working in the hospital and he realized a correlation between two different hospitals where these people who practiced more hygienic, practices before surgery had higher um, had lower mortality rates. And those who didn't had higher mortality rates. And when he expressed this idea to the other doctors, they laughed at him. They criticized him and they ridiculed him so badly that he ended up later in a mental institution. That's how strong consciousness, when it's tied down, when that awareness is held down by a certain level of consciousness, it's very hard to let go of old ideologies, of old ways of thinking. And at the same time, when you have someone with higher consciousness, despite, seemingly the whole world being against them, despite what everybody thinks and believes, they're able to perceive and see through it and see and recognize something different that goes against the grain. They're able to perceive higher, brighter things in the world than what is perpetuated by the collective, what the collective unconscious has all agreed upon that life is all about. They're able to see beyond it. Why? Consciousness enables them to do that. Higher states of consciousness. Now, what does that mean exactly? Higher states of consciousness. Well, when we look at lower states of consciousness, we can understand that lower states of consciousness have common conditions, have very common expressions. You see that people with lower state of consciousness, right? They tend to be very limited in what they can do in their life. Limited by their own minds, limited by their own emotions, limited by life. They're a victim of circumstance. They can't control anything. They're helpless. They don't know what to do. They have ADD, ADHD. They're very selfish, self-focused, self-centric. It's impossible for them to think of others, to do things for others. And it can make sense. If you're suffering a lot, how can you possibly think of someone else when you are trying so hard to escape your own suffering just to feel good? And also, what comes with lower states of consciousness is this sense of black and white, this sense of good and bad. And typically, the qualities that this person possesses, that's the lens by which they view life. It's if you get an innocent and pure child, they might not understand why people do certain things or why people exhibit certain behaviors. It might be confusing to them. Why? Because those qualities don't exist in them. Either they have not been formed yet by their personality, or they're of higher enough consciousness, right? They've collected all these different refractions of light, turn them into something more pure and complete, where they don't recognize this badness there, at least in the way that imposes judgment. When you have this pure awareness, you can see. And this seeing never comes with judgment. It is a stillness because the moment there is a ripple, the moment there is a disturbance in your being, you are interacting with that construct of your own ego, the construct of your own self, your own perceptual field. You are no longer operating from that still, complete awareness of God. The moment that stillness is taken from you, or more like disturbed by you. And that's when an emotion is applied. We'll take it, let's say that we have had a lot of experiences with, you know, dishonesty in our life. Maybe there's that character that exists within us. Maybe we've had a lot of dishonest people who have, been involved in our own life. So now every time you see someone act in an ambiguous way, you're automatically going to assign the character of dishonesty to that person without seeing them truly in their totality. And that assignment will come with its own emotions. It will come with its own volatility. It will come with its own feeling, distaste. It will create stress for you. It will disturb your peace. It will take away something from you the moment you assign something to that experience. Again, this is not related to seeing and common sense. A lot of people think that, if they don't want to place a judgment on someone, that means they have to accept everybody. They have to allow everybody to take advantage of them, everybody to act exactly as they are with them, to look down on them, to treat them poorly, and they should just take it. Why? Because they need to be compassionate and loving and non-judgmental of these people because they're God too. And that's just nonsensical. You can see the truth. You can see, right? If someone has a certain character, right? It's not a judgment to see it. If you're out in nature and you see like, a pink flower, to recognize it's a pink flower is not to have a judgment about the color pink. The judgment would be, oh, I hate that color. It's an ugly flower. That's a judgment. But still, it makes no sense, especially in the advancement of your own consciousness and for the goodness of others, to allow someone, if you see a bad quality within them, to allow them to use it, especially against you, to allow someone to take advantage of you. Sometimes that needs to be taken care of. Either you remove yourself from that situation, you get rid of that person from your life, or you change yourself. But again, sometimes environment is stronger than willpower. And until you're strong enough, higher enough in consciousness, where you can perceive through the smog, the deadness of the human mind, then you might need some environmental assistance to keep you uplifted and happy and bright and good. So, if that's something that all of us have, awareness, that is our unity, our interconnectedness, right? You could call this awareness consciousness, you could call this awareness spirit, whatever terminology you want to use. Awareness, I feel, paints this very specific picture that makes it easy for us to understand its application in our lives. And another word I like to use is power. Power is synonymous with awareness. There is something that you see people who are successful, people who have done a lot with their lives, maybe who have earned a lot of money, who have even gained a certain level of fame and fortune, or maybe people who simply are just happy. Those people all have something in common. They have more power, they have more energy that's available to them. They have access to that heightened awareness that connects them with what they want. And for a lot of these people, they might not exactly know what they're doing or what has given them their success or their happiness. But some part of their being has intuitively reached the point where it's able to just inherently know how to release stored energy within their being, that they can harness higher levels of consciousness, they can harness more power, more awareness. To even perceive life differently, you need more power, you need more energy. That's why we always say, to get to the point where you actually can actually change your consciousness, where you can actually evolve or change your mind, change your thought patterns, or become happy, you need to let go of the garbage first. Now, why is that? Well, as Guruji is saying, if all of your thoughts, they're producing all of these neurotransmitters, right? If you're actively mentally engaged all the time, positive, delusional, negative thoughts, just a lot of thoughts that are always keeping your mind active and never in stillness, you're utilizing a lot of energy. A lot of power is being stored up to the point where there's maybe not even enough energy, not enough power to even sustain your physical form. You see a lot of people who are mentally disturbed, who have a lot of ADD, ADHD, who have a lot of mental instability, often age very quickly, or often come along with a host of physiological disorders. I mean, science has perpetuated and recognizes, talks about it even, the mind body connection. Science knows that there's a relationship to the thoughts we think and our health. What is stored in our mind, our beliefs, our morality, our ethics, our wants, our desires, what motivates us, what gets us out of bed in the morning, all these different things have an effect on our physical health. They see how a perceived stress, even if a stress doesn't actually exist, how a perceived stress can create a host, a cascade of problems throughout your whole body. And like I said, the greatest cause of inflammatory problems today, right? The greatest cause of most of the chronic diseases that you see that exist and are so prevalent nowadays are all inflammation related. And one of the greatest sources of inflammation is stress. And stress is not physical. Stress is a mental state. It is a state of mind. You can't go out in the world and find anything that has stress, that doesn't have a mind. You can't buy stress from the supermarket. You can't buy stress from a car dealership. You can't hunt it or seek it or forage it in nature. Stress doesn't exist anywhere except in the perception of the mind. And the greatest cause of stress for everybody on this planet is because they are not in tune with their spirit. They're living a life that they don't want to live. And that consciousness that wants to express itself through them wants to live life in a certain way so badly, so desperately. And because of this mental construct, this perceptual construct that we are living and limiting ourselves to, these ideologies that we have been handed down, right? These perceptions or views of life that we have not even curated by ourselves, but are rather curated by the masses and infused within us through even just the relational consciousness of those all around us, the vibration, by just living and existing in a society of people who believe these things. So when you actually start living your life, when you start becoming an independent person, you're no longer a child who depends on the mother and father and has that comfort in knowing that they're taken care of. Now you're out on your own. Now you're out finding your happiness, finding your peace. And everything that you've been taught to believe or handed down through the consciousness of all those around you are not doing anything for you. They are creating more confusion. They are creating more disharmony within your being. Stress is simple. Stress is you are doing things that you don't want to be doing and not doing things that you want to be doing. That's stress. That's all that stress is. Stress has nothing to do with the amount of work you have. It has nothing to do with how busy you are. It has nothing to do with anything but the fact that you are doing things that you don't want to be doing. And you have no connection to that deeper mind, that super consciousness. that divine presence, to really feel the spirit and to be able to tell what the soul wants, what consciousness wants. Guruji says all the time, it's like, how can you know that you are following your destiny? How can you know that you are following your life's purpose? How do you know you are following the path that consciousness and life wants for you? That consciousness, that infinite consciousness, wants to experience of life through you. And then people also, because they're so used to everything being defined by society, by science, by our education, by everybody around us, that everything is material and finite. So we start to think that even the things that we wanted yesterday should still be relevant today. That the person we were 10 years ago, the same thoughts and beliefs and ideologies, because we believe that to be who we are, they must match with who we are right now. Because we're this physical being with this mind and this body that doesn't change much throughout our lifetime, even though it's supposed to. When consciousness is evolved, it does. But when it's not, it doesn't change much. It stays the same. And so, just by the association of memory, we start to feel that I liked the color blue when I was 10, I should still like it now. I wanted to be a doctor when I started this program, and now I still should want to be a doctor. It's getting hard. I'm unhappy and I don't like where this is going. I don't even like doing what I'm doing, but I should still do it because at one point in time, I really wanted to do this. People are taught, have children. Children will make you happy. A lot of people have children who don't really want children. A lot of people have children who don't even take care of them, who want nothing to do with them, but that's just what you do in life. You have kids. You earn lots of money. You get the nice car. You get the big house. You earn enough money, you can shop at Whole Foods every day and eat good food and still suffer in terms of your health. Awareness is pure potentiality when it's uninhibited by thought and emotion. It is freedom. It is pure consciousness. But I went over this before. There is, whether we like it or not, a fundamental truth, a fundamental reality to life, an order, a system by which, whether we like it or not, we are operating within that order and that system. A system that consciousness has created and then imbued itself into to experience life. And that order, that construct is the mind, is the self, is the ego identity. It's the Maya, the all of phenomena that is created, all of existence is that system. It's like, the movie, The Matrix. So much so that even the progressions we make in consciousness, the changes and alterations in our being are all inherently programmed by that design set by consciousness to allow you to make those shifts and changes and evolution in your own consciousness. Can you ever be free? Can you ever be independent? That's enlightenment. So you're taking something, this infinite awareness, which is like a supercomputer. It's what so many, religious figureheads call the Godhead. the divine mind, the mind of God, which is this infinite awareness, this pure potentiality, because within it, within consciousness exists everything there is to know about God, creation, the universe, mankind, everything within that one word, consciousness, because consciousness is the substrate of it all. And by itself, it is pure and unlimited. So you have this supercomputer. And on this supercomputer, you have one program running, a very slow processor, or you're spending all your time, you bought this huge supercomputer just to play a game of Minesweeper or solitaire. That the program that's running, dictating the supercomputer, right? The supercomputer, the potentiality is there. It hasn't gone away. It's simply the operating system that has limited its expression. If you're using a supercomputer to play solitaire, you're not going to see the full capacity of the supercomputer. Maybe there won't be a lag in your game of solitaire. I don't know. So when we're looking at thoughts and emotions, then let's look at what these thoughts and emotions really are. Thoughts and emotions are tied together. You usually can't have emotion without a thought tied to it. Right? You can't feel hatred unless there's something you can think of you can hate, right? Even if it's happening on a deeper, more unconscious level where you're not fully conscious of what the emotion is, there's still a neural pathway there that exists that when there's a moment, there's an interaction in your life, it sets things into motion on a mental level that gives you the emotion as the outcome, the expression of what's happening within the mind. And so, to a degree, emotions are a great way to assess what's going on within our minds, because emotions for us, in some ways, are far more obvious as to our states of mind than truly knowing what's going on in our minds. Because thoughts happen so quickly and can be so developed that it's second nature to us that it's not even a conscious process anymore. So, the best way to evaluate our unconscious processes is to look at the emotions that they lead to. Then you can find the source of the emotion by feeling what you feel and wondering, why do I feel that way? Chintan. And then finding the truth at the heart of the matter, which will release yourself from the emotion and bring you back to stillness. So, if we see these two as interrelated, thoughts and emotions, right, and we understand that these are vibrations that can have an effect on other things, science has a terminology for that. That if thoughts and emotions are active forces in our lives, what does that mean? Anything that's an active force is power, energy. An active force that implements change on something else or implements a reaction is energy. So if your thoughts have energy, your emotions have energy, and you can feel that they have energy because of the way that they drain you or uplift you, then we can understand that these thoughts, these emotions that we feel and that we entertain, that we have in our lives are power. They have power to them. I'm not saying they have a lot of power, not in the degree like, like when Guruji's blessing something through his thought intention, he can, make changes to something on the other side of the world in an instant. Not that kind of power, but they still have, to a very limited degree, an amount of power in them. They control your lives, don't they? That must have some kind of power. Others can feel them. That has some kind of power. So, what thoughts are a confined awareness, right? Awareness is that pure potentiality, that pure power. And like when we talk about quantum physics, right? Schrodinger's cat, the pure potentiality is not looking in the box to see if the cat has died or not. If the explosion, right, the bomb has gone off with the cat in the box, the only way you truly know what happened with the cat is if you open the box and you could see if the cat was alive or dead, then that would solidify that reality of the cat being alive or dead. But until you open the box, there's no way of knowing for sure whether the cat is alive or dead. Even if logic would say the cat is dead, there's no way of knowing for sure that the cat is dead until you open the box. Right? The same thing with the two split experiment. When something is observed, it solidifies that reality. When light is observed, it becomes a particle. When it's not observed, it's a wave. In the same way, our thoughts, even down to a quantum level, do dictate our realities. And I'm not just saying like it changes your perception of things. I'm saying that the awareness that is contained within the construct of a thought has the infinite potentiality of awareness within it, even if it's to a small degree, to such extent that it can create ripples into every aspect of your life and thus either reaffirm the life you're living or put it on an upward or downward trajectory, influencing everything from your career to your relationships, your happiness, your success. Right? Remember, I said that there was a relationship between happy people, successful people. They all have power. They all have access to more awareness. They have intuitively found a way in their life, a way of living life, of being in the world, whether it's a mental way of being, whether it's the thoughts they think, the emotions they choose to have or not choose to have, the discipline that they apply over their thoughts, their will, their discernment, who they choose to keep around them. The ways they apply their will. Ultimately, whatever it is, they found some way where they can release, if even for a moment, one of those bubbles of awareness that is tied up in old ways of being and thinking. There are so many cases where you see, like, in cases of great turmoil or great even emotional turbulence, moments where, traumatic events, times where, suddenly you can get a surge of adrenaline, right? And through that surge of adrenaline, suddenly you have access to this incredible physical power where you can perform feats that otherwise, on a day to day basis, without that adrenaline, you could not do. There is a trigger, there is something that activates that power within your being in that moment that gives you access to it. Whether it's an incredible sense of love, an incredible sense of morality or ethics, whether it's just a decision to do something differently. It's incredible emotion. Maybe it's fear even. You often hear, right, especially in like, Hinduism about the Kundalini energy. Well, the Kundalini energy, it's just life force energy. It's the energy of consciousness that sustains your being, that gives you life. That energy of consciousness, that pure potentiality that resides within you, untouched and undisturbed. And in different moments, when you rise to the occasion, I mean, in a way, so does the Kundalini rise to the occasion. You gain access to different aspects of your being that release this stored energy that suddenly makes you privy to other possibilities that were not available to you before. It could be extreme mental feats, it could be physical, it could be spiritual. Of course, these moments are few and far between for the average person. Or if we're talking about somebody who's maybe successful or happy, ultimately, the way that they've found to live and lead their lives have gotten them to a certain point. But beyond that point, they don't know what to do. They don't know how to exceed that, how to go beyond it, how to reach that fulfillment that the spirit wants. You found a peak of happiness, and that's the problem. It's a peak. There's nothing that's the worst for your growth, the antithesis to progress, than remaining stagnant in one place, even if that place is up here. Which is why you see so many people, despite their incredible success, despite what they've been able to do in their life, they often resort to drugs or they start doing other things just to bring back that feeling that they had when they were rising up so quickly. They want that good feeling again. They want that feeling that power gives them. They want that feeling that consciousness gives them. They want that feeling that awareness gives them when it's moving towards something, though they might not know what. It's just that movement that they seek. They want to move again. They want to feel something. A lot of people use drugs. A lot of people use food. A lot of people use television. A lot of people use other people. A lot of people even position themselves as a victim role because even that gives them a feeling. Even injustice, there's some satisfaction that people find in feeling like there's been injustice towards them because they don't have the power to change their life circumstances or advance further in consciousness, right? Maybe they've risen very quickly over a short period of time, but now they're stuck. And so now they're a victim of something, they're a victim of this. They don't know how to move beyond this, or maybe they've fallen very quickly and they want to come back to where they were. But now it's this person's fault, it's that person's fault. It's because I'm doing this and I want to be doing that. It's because of this, it's because of that. I'm the victim. And there's something about feeling that way that gives you, ironically, a sense of relief because there's almost a sense of fulfillment of justice by acknowledging yourself as a victim. And that justice, that feeling that I am not the morally ambiguous one here, I am a good person and life is not treating me well, so it's life's fault. It's other people's fault. And I am good, and that makes them feel good, despite being stuck in their circumstances. You are not a victim of life. You are not a victim of other people. You are not a victim of circumstances. You are never a victim of anything outside of your own consciousness. You are a victim of your own mind. Remember, the things that cause you stress are not the amount of work you have or the other people around you, or it's simply you are not connected to that part within you that is telling you what it wants. It wants peace. It wants stillness. It wants to express itself in different ways. It wants to love. It wants to play. It wants to laugh. And we all have different expressions of our own consciousness. We have these different constructs through our own experiences, right? Our own karmas. We have our own expressions, our own beings that is inherent to us. And so, not one life will look the same for another. You cannot follow the path that has been designed by the billions of people before you and find a pathway for yourself amongst it, because there is nothing alike. So you have this part of you that knows what it wants already, the part of you that thinks it knows what it wants. You have this inherent sense of righteousness, virtue, that makes you feel good when you follow it, the Dharma that makes you feel good when you are in alignment with it. And then you have this part that tortures you when you don't follow it. Right? When you follow the Dharma, you are releasing that stored energy, that life force energy, that boundless potential. And it's easier to see the Dharma when you have that inherent purity. And you feel when you're in alignment with the Dharma because its expressions, the expressions of the Dharma are joy, peace, bliss, happiness, grace, beauty. So when you're not in tune with your spirit, you're not following what the spirit wants, there creates a cascade of a stress response within the body. Because the stress response is designed to activate your being, to bring attention to something, to initiate action, to divert something, to change something. And so when you have a stress response in your mind, right, it's also activating, other neurotransmitters like norepinephrine, which is that fight or flight, the adrenaline, which gives you that heightened awareness and that heightened clarity. You're even more aware of your stress. But at the same time, this stress response, you know what it's doing to your other neurotransmitters, the other activity in the brain? It's actually deregulating all the other neurotransmitters, the neurotransmitters that are responsible for well-being, for a sense of peace, stillness, happiness, joy. It's cortisol when it's present for too long, when it becomes chronic. It actually deregulates the production of neurotransmitters as well as the receptors of those neurotransmitters. So even though you're releasing a lot of these neurotransmitters, the neurons that actually receive these neurotransmitters are no longer receptive to them. They don't pick them up anymore. One aspect of depression they found is that, there's a lot of serotonin that's released into the brain, but the problem is the uptake. There is no reuptake of that serotonin. And that's what they found neurochemically that a lot of depressed people have, is that the receptor to receive that serotonin is no longer engaged. It's no longer picking up on the serotonin. The mind gets confused when you aren't aligned with truth, when you're confused, when you have a lot of weird ways of thinking, when you have no mental peace, when you have a lot of thoughts running through your head. You can imagine the imbalance of neurotransmitters. And the longer you stay in this state of being, the more that they become part of your mental chemistry, part of your brain's chemistry, as well as it also changes your structural brain chemistry as well. The actual structures of the brain start to shift. And like Guruji was saying, I love this because neuroscience talks about it in a slightly different way, but Guruji says you have the subconscious and the unconscious. You have the desires without the deservingness, right? That operates on the fantasy principle without logic and reasoning, very unproductive and useless, essentially. And then you have the subconscious, which operates on practical ways of thinking, on morality and ethics. Basically, the part of yourself, the part of you that is aligned with the spirit. The deeper part of the mind that is still in tune with that pure consciousness, that pure awareness that you can see in children as young as 6 months of age. And so you have this inherent morality instilled upon you by your own soul, your own spirit. Your ability to perceive it and feel it is a different question. But your soul has ways of telling you it's there, whether you can recognize it or not. Like I said, the expression of following the Dharma, bunch of good things. The expression of not following the Dharma is what? Mental chaos, a highly disturbed state of being, low consciousness, low energy, less power to see the things you can do, to be able to do the things you want to do that you can see, less power to be happy, less power to be successful, less power to get and do what you want, less willpower, less motivation, ambition, desire to even get out of bed and continue with the day. Neuroscience says there's this part of the brain, it's called the anterior, I think it's cingulate cortex, the ACC. Those are the abbreviations. It's the ACC. And that part of the brain actually is responsible for differentiating differences between your values, your morals, and your ethics, and the behavior you exhibit. There's an actual part of the brain that does a reconciliation between the two. So it'll highlight in your being. If you have a high enough level of consciousness, you'll be able to recognize where your behaviors, your characters are not aligned with the Dharma. You will feel and know it. When you're not at that level of consciousness, right? Even though there's a lot of disturbance, you might not even recognize why. You might not even recognize that you're not even following your own ethics because it's been so ingrained upon you to follow the ethics and morale of other people, of society by and by large. Maybe in accordance with your life experiences, that your life experience and your experience with other people has taught you that this is what you need to do to survive. That maybe sometimes you need to be petty. Maybe sometimes you can't be humble. Maybe sometimes you need to do this and it doesn't feel good when you do that. But other people have done that and they've risen above you. And so you've decided that I need to do this to be successful too. And it doesn't make you happy. In fact, it disturbs your peace. And you might not necessarily recognize a correlation between these two. But what the ACC will do is it will cause a disturbance. Chaos in the mind means chaos in your emotions, right? When I say you feel the truth, you can feel when you're not aligned. There's always something pointing to the truth within you. There's always something that's trying to realign you, that's pointing to a problem, that's saying there's pain here, there's suffering here, I don't like this. There's stress here, I'm not doing what I want to be doing, and I'm doing things I don't want to be doing. There's stress here. Following this path, maybe you might not even recognize it on an emotional level. Like maybe you're doing the things that you saw other people doing and you don't have a necessarily emotional response, but you have a stress response. It's a very stressful way of living life for you. That alone is your body's way, your mind's way of telling you that this is not true for you, that this is not correct, that this is not happiness, that this is not what consciousness wants to do through you, that this is not allowing your consciousness to be free to express itself. Now, what these blessings do, or when you go into really deep states of meditation, which is honestly really hard to do without the assistance of this incredible, powerful energy, is that this energy, first and foremost, it's multifaceted. The blessing acts as a blanket that disconnects your awareness from all the other awarenesses around you. Right, Guruji, I have my own way of saying it, and Guruji has his way of saying it. Guruji says, it brings in the well wishers into your life and it gets rid of the parasites. I say it brings in the people that are in alignment with your consciousness, that helps the progression of your consciousness. It gets rid of all the people that are infiltrating you on a vibrational level, that are bringing you down, that are rewiring your circuits and making you perceive life in one way because of association with those people. So this energy is acting as a layer of protection that's separating you from the rest of the world so that you can finally feel yourself. So many empaths and so many sensitive people, the problem with them, right, especially women, which are, you know, we're known to be sensitive. And that's what makes us great receivers to this energy is our own sensitivity. But to be sensitive means you are receptive to both good and bad. So you'll see women, they'll go through a lot of mood swings, they'll go through a lot of ups and downs very quickly. Maybe they'll be unpredictable. It's because they're so sensitive, they pick up on things so quickly, which causes a disturbance in their being. And if they're not in tune with their own soul, right? Empaths, for the most part, are always in tune with things outside of themselves. They're always hyper focused on something, or they're always hyper focused on the problem. So they can never truly feel at home in their own being. They can never truly feel the peace of knowing their own soul and understand what their soul is telling them to do. And so these blessings, they kind of get rid of the rest of the interference from all the other auras of all the other 8 billion people on this planet. It brings you back into alignment, back in tune with your own spirit, which is why you go through that healing crisis that Guruji used to talk about. The pain of finally recognizing what's been going on and what you've been missing. And then on top of that, it's like that diamond, right? And those layers of ice around that diamond. Well, those layers of ice are those experiences that we have of life. So we have this perception that's been handed over to us, and then we have our own part in that, which is our own consciousness that we bring into this life, solidified by our own past experiences, by how we've handled those experiences, by what we've chosen to do or not do, by the thoughts we chose to think, the feelings we chose to feel, the traumas we've had, the happy moments we've had, all of those things, those experiences of life solidify into a singular, finite experience of self. And like what the neuroscientists said, that they have found in deep, deep states of meditation, when you're actually meditating, you enter a place of stillness within your mind and your being. They found that activates these theta, alpha, and gamma waves within the brain. which as a result, right, this ripple from that consciousness, that potent, infinite consciousness that ripples out into your mind and reorganizes your totality. It resynchronizes all the other parts of your brain. It aligns you with the subconscious, the unconscious and the subconscious and the conscious form an alignment. Your brain resets, right? This feeling that you have because this stillness, right? There are qualities. I mean, not even qualities per se, but there is a truth in that stillness that, when expressed in a finite form, feels like joy, feels like bliss, feels like ecstasy. And these feelings, when you have a physical experience of them, like I said, that neurotransmitter pathway is bidirectional. So the neurotransmitters create our experience, but at the same time, our experiences create those neurotransmitters. So you go through this whole reset, this whole recalibration, where these experiences of ecstasy with union, with that infinite awareness of God, brings forth into your totality heightened levels of dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, anandamide, GABA, all these different neurotransmitters that promote well-being, happiness, peace, stillness of mind, relaxation, the expression of the Dharma, the expression of truth, the expression of God. These blessings help to melt away that ice around that diamond and return you to that stillness of infinite awareness and infinite potentiality. Where power is. You can't change your perception or change your life without access to power. And these blessings give you that power to be able to see and perceive life differently, to restructure your entire state of being so that you can finally see the path you're supposed to lead, so that you can continue to grow and progress in consciousness, make real transformational work in your life, instead of just reaping the benefits of a quick boost of energy, a quick boost of dopamine or serotonin. Every time you go back into that stillness, your mind is recalibrated. The old pathways, right? Those old bubbles, right? Those thoughts that confine the awareness with all that power into them, that power is released the moment you enter into stillness because the thought disappears. Now your mind has merged with this infinite awareness, this infinite potential, where this awareness has been released from its confinement. Because when you merge with divine and stillness, your sense of self disappears, which is the aspect of you where consciousness has been imbued and confined into. And every time you come back out of it, right, divine has blessed you with this incredible new awareness. And this new awareness, right, it's this new parameter of being, where now, instead of operating with these choices in your life, or this understanding, or this awareness, or these experiences, right? Power, different levels of power contain different conditions of life, different conditions of experience. And so the more you increase that power and that awareness, the greater your experience of life in every degree. We used to call our workshops "Consciousness is Power." And it really is. It's the power to change, the power to be different, the power to be happy, the power to be successful, and the power to be free.